A modern hammer was found sealed inside rock that's 100 million years old. That's one of 25 artifacts that don't fit the timeline. They challenge the story of human evolution. We have objects that show advanced ancient knowledge, relics pulled from stone that's millions of years old, discoveries that don't have a mainstream explanation. You'll see a collection of evidence. It could change how you see human history. A 2,000-year-old jar that worked as an electric battery, a bronze mechanism from ancient Greece. What was it calculating? The story of our past is in these silent objects, these stubborn enigmas. What's still waiting to be uncovered? The hammer looks like it came from a 19th century workshop. But it was found inside stone that formed when dinosaurs were still walking the earth. In 1936, a couple was hiking along Red Creek in Texas. They saw a strange piece of rock with what looked like wood sticking out of it. They broke it open. Inside was a hammerhead, its handle partly fused into the stone around it. That's the London hammer. It's the classic example of what some call an out-of-place artifact, an object that shouldn't be where it was found. The rock that held it is a concretion from the Cretaceous period. That's dated to over 100 million years ago. That's long before modern humans, before any hominids at all, according to the timeline we have. The hammer is made of iron, and it's surprisingly pure. The wooden handle had carbonized. It had turned partially to coal. That detail is often used as proof of its age, because that process is linked to fossilization over immense time. But mainstream geology has another explanation. They say the hammer isn't that old. It's a more recent tool that got caught in a fast-forming mineral concretion. The iron, while pure, isn't impossible for an 1800s tool, and the wooden handle, they argue, could have mineralized in just a few centuries under the right conditions. So it's a debate between two kinds of evidence. There's the undeniable geological context of the stone itself, and then there's the simple, sobering fact that a fully formed hammer doesn't belong in the age of Tyrannosaurus rex. You can compare it to an accepted ancient tool like a Neolithic hand axe. That tool tells a clear story of gradual human development. The London hammer tells no story like that. It just appears a complete technological snapshot dropped into the deep past. So what do you make of it? If the hammer is as old as the rock that held it, then our understanding of human technology is missing entire chapters. It would mean a form of intelligence capable of metallurgy existed in an era we think belonged only to reptiles. If it's a younger object caught in a geological oddity, it's still a stunning demonstration. It shows how nature can create profound mysteries. This one artifact forces a simple, unsettling question. How reliable are the methods we use to date our own history? When the tools we use to measure time meet an object that breaks all the rules, which one do you question? The object or the rules? That theme of unexpected sophistication follows us directly to the next artifact. One that hums with a different kind of power. It suggests a knowledge not of tools, but of energy itself. Electricity seems like a modern discovery, but there's a clay jar from 2,000 years ago that tells a different story. It was found near Baghdad in the 1930s. It looks like an ordinary storage vase, but inside there was a copper cylinder sealed with asphalt. And inside that, an iron rod. To us, that's unmistakable. It has all the parts of a basic battery, a galvanic cell. This object is from the Parthian period, about 200 years before the Common Era. That's a time of empires, not electrical engineering, but the design is too precise. It can't be a coincidence. If you fill the jar with an acidic electrolyte vinegar or fermented grape juice, a chemical reaction starts. The iron corrodes, electrons flow through the copper, and it creates a small, measurable voltage between the two metals. electrochemist Arne Egebrecht tested a replica. He found it could produce just over 1 volt. That's not enough to light a bulb, but it's enough for subtle things. One strong theory is electroplating. Imagine an artisan wanting to gild a small silver statue with gold. Using a series of these jars, they could create a steady current. They could suspend the object in a gold solution. The electrical charge would attract the gold particles, bonding them to the surface in a fine, even coat. Experiments have shown this works. Replicas have been used to electroplate small objects. It's possible with the technology of the time, but if they had this knowledge, why didn't it spark a revolution? Why no ancient wires or generators? That's the mystery. Maybe the knowledge was specialized, held by a small guild of craftsmen for specific purposes, ceremonial or medicinal. Some suggest the mild shock could have been used in healing. An early form of electrotherapy, or maybe the effect was seen as magical, a sacred trick for temples. The knowledge could have been lost like a family recipe. Disappearing with its practitioners during upheaval, it challenges the linear story of progress. We imagine discovery as a continuous climb, but history has peaks and valleys. Knowledge found and then forgotten. The Baghdad Battery isn't a power plant, it's a whisper, a hint that someone, long before Volta or Galvani, understood a fundamental force well enough to harness it in a clay pot. They saw the interaction between two metals and an acid not as magic, but as a usable phenomenon. It raises a question about how innovation spreads. Does every discovery lead to an age of application? Or can brilliant insights remain isolated curiosities, flashes of understanding that fade before they catch fire? The jar sits silently, holding its charge not of electricity but of possibility. It suggests our ancestors were not just philosophical or artistic, they were inquisitive experimenters, probing the boundaries of their world with the tools they had. And if they were experimenting with invisible energy, what about the visible world, the world of motion and mechanics? Our next artifact shifts from a chemical mystery to a puzzle of gears and precision. Found in the wreckage of a ship that sank over 2,000 years ago, sponge divers found it in 1901. They were near the island of Antikythera in stormy water, working a Roman shipwreck. There were statues, pottery, and there was this lump, corroded metal and wood. It looked like junk, just encrusted, forgotten, but that lump, once they cleaned it, became one of the most important finds ever. We call it the Antikythera Mechanism. It's from about 100 BCE, the oldest analog computer we know. For decades, no one knew what it was, not until the 1970s. With X-rays, they could see inside, and they found gears, at least 30 bronze gears, all interlocking, in a wooden case about the size of a big book. Inscriptions on it like a manual. This wasn't a toy, it was a model, a mechanical model of the cosmos. Later studies with 3D X-rays showed more. It could predict eclipses. Solar, lunar, it tracked the moon's orbit, the irregular path, with real accuracy that takes deep knowledge. It showed the sun, the moon, the 5 planets. Against the zodiac, it even counted down to the next Olympics. As Tony Freeth said, its mechanical genius wasn't matched again for 1,000 years. You can see it in the reconstructions. Teams have built replicas from the scans, hand-cut gears. You turn a crank and the dials spin, the pointers move, it predicts the events, it proves it worked. It was a functional calculator for the heavens, which leads to a question: how does knowledge this advanced just vanish? This mechanism is a peak, ancient engineering, ancient science. But after that ship sank, the technology seems gone. No other devices found. Writings hint at things like it, but the proof was lost at the bottom of the sea for 2,000 years. It makes you wonder, what else was lost to time, to war, to decay? The mechanism changes the story. Progress isn't always a straight line. Innovation can be fragile. A society that built this was observing, calculating, mechanizing the universe at a level we didn't credit them with. It speaks to a tradition of craftsmanship, of scholarship, maybe more widespread than we thought. If they could conceive a portable planetarium made of gears, what else could they conceive? Could that understanding have reached beyond the stars to the very shape of the Earth? That idea of lost knowledge, of unexpected capability, it takes us to the next artifact, one that suggests ancient explorers might have had maps. Maps of the world far more accurate than we ever imagined. Archaeologists were digging at a Native American site in Maine. This was in 1957. The site itself was from the 12th to the 14th centuries, a seasonal place for fishing and trade. Long before any Europeans came, they found thousands of artifacts. But one was different, a small silver coin. When they identified it, the story shifted. It was a Norse penny, minted in Norway between 1065 and 1080 under King Olaf Kyrre. The Maine penny, a medieval Scandinavian coin found in the dirt at Penobscot Bay. It's the only confirmed Norse artifact ever found in the United States. That discovery is a quiet thunderclap. It means Viking voyages might have gone much further south than we thought, further than Elant's Orcs Meadows in Newfoundland. That settlement is proof of Norse presence around the year 1000, but it's over 1,000 miles to the north. So how did this coin get here? The context matters. It wasn't just lying on the surface. It came from a documented layer, a stratum with native artifacts, bone tools, pottery. That layering suggests it was placed there centuries ago. Most researchers accept it as genuine, not a hoax, but its journey is the mystery. One theory is about trade networks, a Norse trader at Elant's Orcs Meadows. He might have carried coins not for buying things but as raw silver. The silver itself had value to indigenous peoples. They could work it into jewelry. So a coin is traded, and then it starts moving south, passed from group to group, along ancient routes that connected the continent. An exotic piece of material traveling through a network for generations, until it's finally lost at a coastal camp in Maine. But its isolation is strange. It's the only Norse thing there. No swords, no nails, no other signs. A solitary whisper that makes some archaeologists cautious. Could a later European colonist have brought it and lost it? The site layer argues against that, but the debate stays open. The coin is a specific type, a Norwegian penny. On one side, a crude cross. On the other, a stylized bird, maybe a raven. A tiny piece of a king's economy, a world away. Its presence asks big questions. Did Viking ships explore the New England coast? Were there brief, unrecorded encounters that left only this one fragile piece of evidence? It speaks to the fragility of history. A single, durable object survives to tell a tale. All the wood, the cloth, the stories are gone. It makes you consider the silent evidence. The contacts and exchanges that left no ruins, only echoes in the artifacts that remain. If a coin could travel that far from its origin, what about knowledge? What about a map? A map that seems to show continents with an impossible accuracy, centuries before they were known. A single coin moving between continents is one thing. But a tool sealed inside stone for 400 million years, that's different. In 1844, at the Kingoodie quarry in Scotland, workers were splitting a large block of Devonian sandstone. This rock dates to over 400 million years ago. Life was just beginning to crawl onto land. When the block broke open, they saw something impassable. Inside the solid stone was what looked like an iron tool. Its shape was unmistakable against the rock. Some called it a hammer or a large nail. Others said it was like a measuring rule. The object was fully encased. It was as if the sandstone had formed around it. That's the Kingoodie Hammer, and its story is the core of the out-of-place artifact problem. The first question was geological. How does a man-made object get into rock that predates humanity by hundreds of millions of years? Sandstone is sedimentary. It forms from layers of sand compressed over immense time. For the tool to be inside, it had to be there before the sand solidified. The workers and the quarry owner were sure the stone was solid, unbroken. The tool wasn't in a crack, it was within the stone itself. Word reached the scientific circles of the time. Some geologists looked at it, but many dismissed it as a curiosity, a freak of nature. The prevailing view was that it must be an ironstone nodule, a natural concretion of minerals that, by chance, formed a shape like a tool. Ironstone can create rod-like and wedge-like forms as minerals precipitate. But the problem was the eyewitness accounts. Those who saw it insisted on its crafted appearance, the straight lines, the clear head of a hammer. Yet without modern photography, we have only sketches and descriptions. And then the artifact itself vanished. It was lost, leaving only the written record and drawings behind. That loss is its own kind of metaphor. Without the physical object to test, the Kingoodie artifact exists in a limbo of interpretation. It becomes a story about how science handles anomalies. In the 19th century, the framework of deep time and evolution was being built. A hammer from the Devonian period didn't just challenge a timeline. It threatened to collapse the entire new structure of understanding, so it was labeled a concretion, an oddity, and filed away. The burden of proof was placed on the extraordinary claim, rightly. But it makes you wonder, how many other anomalies have been quietly set aside because they didn't fit the narrative of the moment? The Kingoodie story isn't necessarily about proving an advanced civilization in the age of fish. It's about the tension between observation and theory. When you see something that looks crafted, but every model says it cannot be, which do you trust? Your eyes or the model? That tension prepares us for a leap, not in time but in capability. If some artifacts suggest a presence in deep time, others suggest a knowledge that seems to leap forward. The next discovery doesn't question when humans were here, but what they knew. It's a small, stylized model found in a tomb, and it bears an uncanny resemblance to something that wouldn't be invented for millennia. It looks for all the world like a modern aircraft. They found this small wooden carving in a tomb at Saqqara. It's from about 200 years before the Common Era. At first, you'd think it's a bird, a stylized bird, but the wings are straight, they're not feathered. The body is sleek like a fuselage, and the tail, it's vertical. Like a rudder on a plane, not horizontal like a bird's tail. This is the Saqqara Bird, and it's not just representing a creature. The design suggests aerodynamics. It's small, about the length of a hand, made of sycamore wood. To a modern eye, it looks uncanny, less like a bird in flight, more like a model glider. The wings have an aerofoil cross-section, thicker at the front, tapering back. That shape is key. It generates lift. A flat wing doesn't do that, an aerofoil does. The tail is distinctive too. It's a separate, upright fin. In nature, only a few birds have tails notched for maneuverability like the swift, but this tail is a perfect 90-degree angle. It's a design for stability in the air, not for perching, so engineers have looked at it. Aerodynamics experts like Dr. Simon Sanderson, they've built scale replicas weighted correctly. And when launched with a simple hand launcher, these models fly. They show stable, graceful gliding flight. The design works. It's not just decorative. It incorporates an understanding of flight mechanics, intuitive or perhaps intentional. It lacks propulsion, of course, and landing gear, but as a glider model, it is functionally sound. So what was it for? The mainstream archaeological view is cautious. It could be a ceremonial object, a votive offering for a bird deity, or just a child's toy. A throwable glider. The ancient Egyptians were keen observers of nature. They saw birds soar. Could a clever artisan have unconsciously captured that form in a way that aligns with aerodynamic principles? It's possible intuitive design can stumble upon truths, but the other possibility is more provocative. Could it be a model of something larger, a scaled-down representation of a gliding craft? Used in ceremonies, maybe, or a prototype from a line of inquiry we know nothing about. We have no records of ancient Egyptian aviation, but the absence of records doesn't prove the absence of experimentation. Knowledge can be lost or kept secret or exist in a practical, unrecorded form. Modern hobbyists have added to this speculation. Enthusiasts have built larger, radio-controlled models of the design. And they fly remarkably well. It performs like a basic monoplane. That doesn't prove the ancients had aircraft, but it proves the artifact itself is not merely a bird. Its geometry contains the seed of flight. This artifact sits at a crossroads. Is it a testament to human intuition, the ability to mimic nature in a functionally efficient way? Or is it a fossil of a different kind, a physical hint of a line of technological thought that was pursued, then abandoned, leaving only this cryptic model in a tomb? It asks us how we recognize advanced knowledge when it doesn't come with a manual, when it's carved in wood, not etched in a textbook. If a simple wooden form can hold aerodynamic secrets, what about an object made of a material that shouldn't exist? A material that speaks not of flight but of a mastery over matter itself, from an era we thought was primitive. The iron pillar of Delhi is in the Quad complex. It's made of metal, not stone, over 7 meters tall, a single forged column of iron. It's been standing for more than 1600 years. It was erected in the 4th century under King Chandragupta II. There's a Sanskrit inscription on it, praising the god Vishnu, commemorating a king's victories, but the real marvel is the material itself. This is Delhi. Hot, humid seasons, monsoon rains, and this ancient iron pillar shows almost no rust. It's uncorroded, defiantly so. Modern steel structures nearby need constant maintenance. This isn't luck, it's advanced, intentional science from a time we often call primitive. The secret is in the composition. Modern analysis shows it's wrought iron. Exceptional purity, very high phosphorus content, very low sulfur and manganese. That specific recipe is the key. When high phosphorus iron is exposed to air, it doesn't form that flaky, destructive rust. Instead, it forms a thin, stable, protective film, a passive layer, iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate to be precise. It adheres tightly to the metal, shields it from further oxidation. It's a self-healing barrier. The initial exposure created the shield, and that shield has lasted for centuries. Forging it was a feat in itself. The pillar weighs over 6 tons. It was likely made by hammer welding. Individual pieces of hot iron joined together, teams of artisans at a giant forge, meticulously joining sections. Precision that left no weak seams. The inscription says the pillar was erected elsewhere, possibly in present-day Madhya Pradesh, moved to Delhi centuries later. Transporting it, re-erecting it, a colossal metal object that speaks to an incredible mastery of engineering. Modern attempts to replicate this corrosion resistance have largely failed. Using period-appropriate methods, scientists can analyze the protective layer, but recreating the exact forging process, the specific ore source, the atmospheric conditions of that first critical year, that's proven elusive. It suggests the Gupta period ironworkers weren't just skilled. They had a nuanced, maybe intuitive, understanding of materials. They knew their local ores. They developed a process through trial, observation, accumulated craft wisdom, a process that produced a material capable of defying time. This pillar forces a shift in perspective. We often frame technological history as a steady, upward climb, but here's a peak of materials science from the 4th century. We struggle to explain it fully even today. It wasn't surpassed in its specific purpose for over a millennium. What other industrial or chemical processes did ancient cultures master? only for that knowledge to fade away with the society that nurtured it. The pillar stands as a silent reminder. Our ancestors weren't just philosophers and artists, they were profound practical scientists. They solved real-world problems. With elegance and durability, if they could engineer a metal to last forever, what else did they engineer their world to understand? Perhaps they turned their gaze upward. Crafting devices not to withstand the elements, but to track the movements of the cosmos itself. It was 1999. Two men were digging illegally on a hill in Germany. They were treasure hunters on the Mittelberg using metal detectors, and what they pulled from the earth wasn't a coin. It wasn't a sword. It was a bronze disc about the size of a dinner plate. Tarnished green with inlays of gold, the gold seemed to show a crescent moon, a full sun or maybe a full moon, and then a cluster of stars. Between them, there were these graceful arcs curving along the edges. And at the bottom, what looked like a boat sailing on a golden line. That's the Nebra Sky Disc, dated to around 1600 BC. It's the oldest portable representation of the cosmos ever found. That's not disputed. It was buried in a hoard with two swords, axes, bracelets from the early Bronze Age, the unearthed culture. People we didn't really associate with that kind of abstract cosmic art. The symbols aren't random. Archaeologists and astronomers have looked at them. That cluster of 7 stars is almost certainly the Pleiades, and that star group has been a critical marker for agricultural societies everywhere. Its appearance and disappearance in the sky signaled planting times, harvest times. Those golden arcs on the sides were added later. Each one spans an angle of 82 degrees. And that's precisely the angle between sunset positions at the summer and winter solstices at that specific latitude, so the disc could have been used as a physical calculator. You could align it with the horizon and determine the solstices. You could synchronize the lunar calendar, that's the crescent, with the solar year. That harmonization was vital. A lunar year is about 11 days shorter than a solar year. Without correction, festivals and planting seasons would just drift through the seasons. The disc provided a visual, mechanical way to keep time in sync. Its construction tells a story. The disc was modified in phases. First, it had just the basic celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, and the 32 stars. Then the 2 horizon arcs were added. Later, the golden boat was placed at the bottom. Some researchers think that's not a boat. They see it as the Milky Way. Or a solar barge, a vessel carrying the sun through the underworld at night, an idea known in later myths. Each modification refined its purpose, turned it from a simple representation into a sophisticated instrument. It's a snapshot of scientific thought in progress, etched in bronze and gold. The materials tell a story too. The bronze came from Austrian ore, the gold likely from Cornwall in Britain. That alone speaks of trade networks, far-reaching ones, but more, it speaks of value. They chose the most durable, the most precious materials they could access to encode this knowledge. This wasn't casual art. It was important enough to be made permanent, to be passed down. The unearthed people were skilled metal workers, but we knew them for practical things. Tools and weapons. The disc reveals a different dimension. It shows they were also cosmologists. They observed, they measured, they sought to represent the orderly patterns above them. They built a device to bridge human time and celestial time. You can compare it to the Antikythera Mechanism, but they're separated by over a millennium. One is gears and precision, the other is symbols and alignment. Both serve the same human urge to understand and predict the cosmos. How was this knowledge transmitted? Was the disc unique, or was it part of a wider tradition of astronomical observation in prehistoric Europe? Its sophistication suggests it couldn't have sprung from nowhere. It implies a lineage of stargazers, a school of thought that's left no other physical traces. The disc alone survived, buried on a hill, perhaps as a ritual offering. Its silent symbols ask us to reconsider the inner lives of people we call Bronze Age. They weren't just surviving, they were mapping the sky, seeking harmony with its cycles. If a culture in Central Europe, 16 centuries before the Common Era, could encode such complex calendar knowledge in metal, what does that say about the flow of ideas in the ancient world? It suggests pools of advanced understanding could appear, far from the civilizations we traditionally study. This idea of unexpected, isolated sophistication, it pulls our gaze now to a different part of the world entirely, to a desert plateau, and to stones that carry a message we have only just begun to decipher. A geode is a stone with a secret inside. It forms when water with minerals gets into a hollow space and the crystals grow inward. So you get this rough outside hiding something beautiful. In 1961, 3 men were in the Coso Mountains in California looking for geodes. They found one, a lump that looked good. They cut it open, but there were no crystals. Inside the stone was something else. It looked exactly like a modern spark plug. A mechanical thing inside what they thought was a rock 500,000 years old. That's the Coso Artifact, and if that age was right, it would be the ultimate misplaced object. A piece of 20th century technology, sealed up from a time when humans were just starting to use fire. The first reaction was just shock. You could see a ceramic part, a metal shaft, even a hexagonal nut, all inside this hardened shell. They took it to a geologist who looked at the crust on it and the local rock. That's where the 500,000-year figure came from. The story got out fast. People said it was proof of ancient visitors or a lost civilization, a spark plug from the Pleistocene. The idea was huge, but then people looked closer. They got X-rays of the thing. The X-rays showed everything. Inside that mineral lump, the parts were clear, and they matched one specific model, a champion spark plug from the 1920s. The ceramic, the metal, the size of the nut, all of it fit automotive tech from the early 1900s, so the main mystery seemed over. The object itself was modern. But that left another question. How did a 1920s spark plug get so completely covered in what looked like ancient stone? This is where geology has an answer. The shell wasn't a geode that took ages. It was a concretion. Concretions form when minerals come out of water and glue sediment around something in the middle. That center can be anything: a fossil, a rock, or here, a lost spark plug. In the right conditions with mineral water, this can happen very fast. In places like a lake bed or a mineral spring, an object can get fully encased in a hard shell in just decades. The Coso Mountains have those conditions, so the likely story is simple. A prospector or a driver in the 1920s or 30 lost a spark plug. It fell into a mineral spring or an alkaline pool. Over the next 40 or 50 years, a hard concretion formed around it. Then erosion brought it to the surface, and it was found looking impossibly old. The debate about it became a kind of lesson. Different people saw the evidence differently. For some creationist thinkers, it was first held up as a challenge to mainstream geology, to the idea of deep time. For scientists, it became an example of a modern object that was misidentified because of a flawed but understandable geological guess. The two sides talked past each other, focused on proving or disproving the big claim, not on the middle ground, how nature can create these convincing illusions. Then the artifact vanished. After it was in a magazine, it disappeared. Nobody knows where it is now. That disappearance fed more speculation. Conspiracy theories said it was hidden because it revealed an inconvenient truth. A simpler idea is that a private collector has it and kept it private, without the actual object to test with new tools. The Coso artifact is stuck in that old argument. A photo, an X-ray, and a lot of questions. It's a lesson in looking for strange things. How do you tell a real, world-changing mystery from a modern thing that's been misread? The Coso case shows you need a strict process, immediate, independent analysis, careful notes on exactly where and how it was found, and the humility to follow the evidence, even when it leads to a less exciting answer. It reminds us that our want to find proof of the extraordinary can sometimes make us see what we want to see in a stone or in a spark plug, but that same want is what drives us. To keep looking, to keep asking, and sometimes that search finds things with no easy answer at all, things whose origins are so obscure they can't be simply classified, and all you have is their strange, quiet presence. Kai Pu Te was an archaeologist. In 1938, he took an expedition into the Bayan Kararula Mountains. They went into a cave system, and on the cave floor they found these unusual skeletal remains. Small with large skulls, and with them they found hundreds of stone discs. Each one was about a foot across. There was a hole in the center, and a fine spiral groove ran from that center out to the rim. They're called the Dropa Stones. That alone would be an odd find. Neolithic ceremonial discs maybe, but then the story changed. In the 1960s, new claims came out. The spiral grooves weren't just decoration. They were said to be a continuous line of microscopic hieroglyphs. A professor named Tsum Nui supposedly decoded them. The translation told a story. It described a group called the Dropa. Their spacecraft had crashed in those mountains long ago. They couldn't repair it. The survivors tried to make peace with the local tribes, but they were met with fear and conflict. The discs were their recorded message, their plea. The physical description added to it. The discs were made of a granite-like stone, laced with cobalt and other metals, incredibly hard. The precision of that microscopic writing would imply a technology far beyond simple carving. But the problem is the evidence. You can't verify it. No reputable museum has a Dropa stone. The original archaeological reports from 1938 have never been produced. The professor, the institute where he worked, there are no independent records. Mainstream archaeology dismisses it. They suggest if the stones exist, they're probably by discs. Common ceremonial jade discs from ancient China, though the spiral groove isn't typical, or more bluntly, it's an elaborate hoax, woven from snippets of real archaeology and imagination. It's a familiar pattern, a dramatic discovery in a remote location by a lone figure. Initial reports are vague, then the key artifacts vanish, the documentation disappears. Leaving only second-hand accounts, passionate retellings, the lack of evidence becomes, for some, proof of a cover-up. For scholars, it's just an unsubstantiated story. But the narrative holds power. It speaks to a curiosity, the idea that our past might hold contact with something from beyond our world. It's compelling. It challenges the official timeline, not with a tool but with a potential relationship. A first contact scenario, etched in stone. The story forces a confrontation. We build history on physical evidence, documentation, peer review. This story provides none of that, but it offers a breathtaking possibility. So where does curiosity land? Do we dismiss it entirely, or does a part of us wonder what if the stones are lost to official records? They exist now as a story about stories. And it shows how the line between myth and history can blur. When the only evidence left is a tale told and retold, that search for meaning in stone leads to another artifact. One that is very real, physically present, covered in markings no one has ever convincingly explained. It sits in a museum, not a cave. Its mystery is etched in plain sight. There's a museum in Peru. It holds thousands of stones, and these stones tell a story that, according to science, shouldn't be possible. They're called the Ica Stones. They're small, made of andesite, weathered, covered in these fine line engravings. The images are startling. You see human figures standing right next to creatures we recognize as dinosaurs. Stegosaurs with their plated backs, Triceratops with the 3 horns. pterodactyls up in the air. Then there are other stones. They show complex medical scenes. One looks like a cesarean section. Another shows a heart transplant with the vessels all connected. There are maps of continents we don't know. Astronomers using telescopes to study the stars. If these stones were ancient, they'd be the most revolutionary historical documents ever found. They'd place humans in the age of reptiles, grant them knowledge thousands of years ahead of its time. The story starts in the 1960s. A farmer named Basilio Ashuya began selling these stones to tourists. He said he found them in a cave. They caught the attention of a local physician, Dr. Javier Cabrera. He became utterly convinced they were authentic. He bought thousands, built a private museum in Ica to house them all. For Cabrera, the stones were a record. A lost, advanced civilization, one that had mastered medicine and astronomy and lived alongside dinosaurs. His passion turned the stones into a phenomenon. A puzzle that drew in believers and skeptics. Archaeologists were deeply skeptical from the start. The andesite was local, but the engravings, they showed no signs of the weathering you'd expect from stones buried for centuries. The lines were sharp, fresh. The artistic style was inconsistent. It mixed modern comic book clarity with attempts at a primitive design, and the depictions were just too perfect. The dinosaurs matched the popular reconstructions of the 1960s. Not how ancient people might have seen fossil bones. The medical procedures mirrored 20th century surgery. Not ancient healing practices. Then the mystery unraveled further. The farmer, Basilio Ashuya, admitted in a later interview. He said he carved the stones himself. He and other local artisans used simple tools. They'd etch the designs, then age them by baking them in donkey dung to create a patina. He said he created the stories to sell more stones. To eager buyers, for most researchers, that confession closed the case. The Ica stones were a clever hoax, a lucrative one, but some proponents argue not all the stones can be dismissed. They suggest Ashuya might have copied a smaller set of genuine ancient stones to meet demand, that a few authentic artifacts could exist in the vast collection. That idea is hard to prove. The provenance of every stone is now hopelessly muddled. The whole collection exists in this shadowland, between commerce and belief and potential history. The enduring power of the Ica stones isn't in their likely falsity. It's in what they reveal about our own minds. They represent a deep curiosity, an almost yearning to fill the blank spaces in our past. When the official timeline feels incomplete, the imagination rushes in with dramatic alternatives. The stones gave physical form to a captivating narrative. That our ancestors witnessed a lost world, that they were custodians of forgotten wisdom. They show how easily a compelling story can overshadow a dry, methodological truth. This phenomenon, where a sensational claim draws more attention than the careful work of disproof, it's a recurring theme in the study of anomalies. It asks us to be vigilant, not just about the artifacts, but about our own desires when we look at them. Do we seek to understand or to confirm what we already wish was true? The Ica episode is a cautionary tale about the allure of forgeries, which can sometimes drown out the quieter, more genuine mysteries, the ones still waiting to be heard. Like the next artifact, it carries no dramatic scenes of dinosaurs or surgery. Its mystery is quieter, woven into the very fiber of its being, and its age isn't in doubt. Only its purpose. There's this map from 1513, drawn by an Ottoman admiral, Piri Reis. Only a piece of it is left. Shows the Atlantic, the coasts of Europe, Africa, the Americas. But the bottom edge, that's where it gets strange. Below South America, there's a landmass drawn, detailed coastline with bays, rivers, mountains, and Piri Reis wrote notes on it. He said he didn't make this from his own travels. He said he put it together from older maps, about 20 of them. Some of those, he wrote, were from the time of Alexander the Great. From the ancients, he describes this southern land as warm with large snakes, and he says the old maps showed this coast clearly. They drew it just as it is. The thing is, that land looks a lot like Antarctica. Antarctica wasn't officially seen until 1818, not mapped in detail for another 100 years, and the shape it seems to match the land under the ice. Queen Maud Land, the coastline beneath miles of ice. The map shows it not as it is now, but as it might have been when it was last free of ice. That was at least 6,000 years ago. Maybe longer. Historians are split. The map is a navigational chart. It's very accurate for the Old World, for Brazil. For the southern part, most scholars think it's something else. Maybe Terra Australis, that theoretical southern continent a lot of mapmakers included, could be a distorted guess at the tip of South America, a mix of rumors. The notes about warmth and snakes don't fit Antarctica at all, but the fit with the subglacial coast is precise. In the 1960s, a professor named Charles Hapgood looked at it. Albert Einstein supported his work. Hapgood said the alignment was too exact. He thought Piri Reis had source maps that were copied over and over, maps that came from a seafaring civilization long before the last ice age. A civilization that mapped the world. That knowledge might have been kept in places like the Library of Alexandria, then scattered, lost, except for fragments like this. So it comes down to interpretation. Is the map a lucky guess, a composite of stories, drawn with what was known in 1513, or is it a fossil, a ghost in the parchment? A piece of knowledge that shouldn't exist in any era we know. If it's real, then the implications are deep. It means there was a period of global exploration. Advanced geography, before any civilization we recognize, a culture that mapped a continent that would soon be buried in ice. How did they do it? No satellites. No precise clocks for longitude. It makes you consider lost epochs, times when knowledge was gained, recorded, and then almost entirely erased by time. By climate change, by catastrophe. This fragment is an argument for the fragility of history. It suggests the story we tell about discovery. A straight line from ignorance to knowledge might be missing whole chapters. Chapters that were burned, lost at sea, faded away. If a culture could map the world like this, what else did they understand? Did their knowledge go beyond geography? Into the forces that shape the earth itself. That leads to another artifact, one that seems to speak not of maps but of power. A device that hints at an ancient understanding of energy. One that feels strangely modern. Inside the Hathor temple at Dendera, there's a wall carving, a scene that feels out of place, two figures, each one holding up this long, bulb-shaped object. And inside it, a snake. The snake stretches from one end to the other. Its head touches a line like a wire that runs to a small box. To us now, it looks exactly like a light bulb. A filament inside, a cable, a power source, that's the Dendera Light. Some see it as proof, ancient electricity. Mainstream Egyptology sees a misreading. A symbol mistaken for technology. Their interpretation is specific. The object isn't a bulb, it's a lotus flower. The lotus, in their mythology, means creation. Emerging from the water, the snake inside is the god Harsomptus. That's the life force. The cable is a jed pillar, stability. The box is the god Hair, holding notches for eternity. The whole scene is religious, a moment of creation, sacred power for the temple. But the technological view asks a question. Why does this symbol mirror an electrical system so closely? Researchers like Peter Krasser and Reinhard Habeck break it down. The enclosure could be glass, the snake, the filament, the jed pillar, an insulated cable. The box with the baboon may be a generator or a Leyden jar storing charge. They point to the temples, the deep interior chambers, no soot on the ceilings. How were they lit for all that carving? Torches would have blackened everything. Was there another kind of light, something smokeless? People have tried to build it. Lamps based on the design, glass tubes, different gases, trying to get the snake to glow. The results are mixed. Some setups produce a faint, sustained glow. Like an old Crookes tube, but nothing bright enough, nothing practical to light a chamber. The evidence is suggestive, not conclusive, so there's a dilemma here. When is a symbol not just a symbol? Ancient cultures encoded their understanding of the world into sacred art. Planets became gods in chariots. Fertility became ritual. Could they have woven electrical phenomena into their cosmology, not as a practical system, but as a representation, a divine, visible energy, static charge from amber? The glow of certain minerals, the carving challenges our lens. We see a bulb because we live with bulbs. They saw a lotus birthing a snake, a world of natural metaphors. The truth might be in between, both a spiritual symbol and an echo of an observed phenomenon, blended into one image. It makes you wonder what else we're misreading. Looking for gears and wires where they saw the handiwork of the gods, this search leads to something else, an object of a different nature, where the mystery isn't symbolism. It's the physical presence itself, immense weight, precision, something that seems to defy the capabilities of its time. Hundreds of stone spheres are found in Costa Rica. Some are small, like a melon. Others are huge, over 2 meters wide, weighing tons. They're nearly perfect spheres, smooth surfaces made from hard granodiorite. They were made by the Dikwis culture between 300 and 1500 years ago. In the 1930s, banana companies were clearing the jungle in the Dikwis Delta, and workers kept finding these objects. They came out of the earth like giant marbles. Their purpose, though, was never stated. They're a manufacturing marvel. Using only stone tools, artisans achieved a geometry of stunning precision. That near-perfect roundness across so many sizes points to a deep knowledge, a technique passed down. The process probably started by choosing a large boulder. Using harder stones, workers would have pecked at the surface, slowly rounding it. Then, with sand and water, they would grind and polish for months, maybe years. The labor is staggering. These weren't farming tools, they weren't weapons, they had no obvious use. So why make them? Archaeologists have ideas. They might have been status symbols. A display of a chief's power to command so much labor for pure prestige. They could have been territorial markers, showing sacred spaces or clan boundaries. Some researchers looked for astronomical alignments. Maybe groups of spheres were arranged to point to solstice sunrises or important stars, but the spheres were moved. When found, many weren't in their original spots. Landowners had rolled them away or taken them to decorate gardens and government buildings. That destroyed the context. We lost the patterns. The original arrangements that might have shown their meaning are gone. That loss is a profound lesson. An artifact without its context is a sentence without a story. The spheres now sit in isolation. Their silence is haunting. They make you ask about the society that made them. What level of organization was needed? A project this demanding needs planners, overseers, skilled artisans, and many laborers. It means a stable, structured community with resources to spare. Resources not for survival, but for meaning. The spheres were an expression of unity, of cosmic order, of identity carved in stone. They show a human drive to impose perfect form on a chaotic world. To create something enduring that speaks beyond words. If these spheres were markers of territory or cosmic order, what happens when that order breaks? Our next artifact seems to record a moment of such deep disruption. It might be the memory of a real catastrophe, etched into a culture's mythology. In South Africa, miners were cutting through pyrophyllite. This soft stone is about 3 billion years old, from the Precambrian, back when life was just microscopic, single-celled. Inside this rock, they found small, hard spheres. Metallic, usually no bigger than a walnut, and many had these fine, parallel grooves, like lines etched by a tool. They're called the Klerksdorp Spheres. To us, they look manufactured, too perfect, too symmetrical. They seem like tiny components, bearings or ornaments, but from a time before multicellular life even existed. They became a sensation in alternative circles. Here was proof, it seemed, of an intelligent presence in Earth's deep past. The grooves were clear machining marks. The perfect roundness suggested a lathe. The story was powerful. A lost advanced civilization or visitors from beyond left these objects. They became a staple. Evidence presented to shatter the conventional timeline. Geologists see it differently. The spheres are natural, they're concretions. A concretion forms when mineral cement hardens around a nucleus in sedimentary rock. Over immense time, they grow in layers, often spherical. The material is usually pyrite or goethite, common iron-based minerals, those precise grooves. They're not tool marks, they're the seams where different crystalline layers met as the sphere grew. Under pressure, the seams become pronounced, creating that uncanny, manufactured look. The process is natural, a quirk of geology. Researchers have cut them open. Inside, they often find a core, a tiny grain of sand, the minerals accreted around it. The internal structure is radial, like an onion, consistent with gradual growth, not fabrication. The variations in size, the slight imperfections, they argue against mass production. They're geological accidents of stunning regularity. This is a lesson in perception. Our brains seek patterns, recognize design. It's a survival trait. We see symmetry and parallel lines we think made. It takes geological literacy to override that, to understand the slow artistry of natural chemistry and pressure. Over billions of years, the spheres challenge not history but our interpretation. They show how easily we project our technological frame onto ancient, indifferent processes. The debate highlights a tension. Faced with an unexplained object, do we leap to the dramatic conclusion, an unknown civilization, or do we first exhaust the known, subtle explanations from science? The spheres remind us, nature can produce wonders that rival our craftsmanship without any guiding intelligence. That's a humbling realization, and it prepares us for a different mystery. Not apparent manufacture, but deliberate communication, an artifact covered in symbols, symbols that refuse to yield their message, a script that has stared back at scholars for centuries. Guarding its secrets, the Phaistos Disc, it's a clay disc about the size of a small plate, found in the Minoan Palace on Crete. Both sides have this spiral of symbols stamped into the clay. Not carved, stamped. Each symbol was made with a separate seal. That was in the 2nd millennium BC, 1700 years before the Common Era. It's the oldest known printed text, and we don't know what it says. The script is unique. There are 241 tokens from just 45 different signs. You see human figures, heads with plumed helmets, birds, fish, tools, plants, geometric shapes. They move in a tight spiral from the edge to the center. The sequence looks deliberate, grouped into what might be words, separated by short lines, but there's no key. No parallel inscription in a known language has ever been found with it. It's a locked door. We've never found the key. Scholars have tried for over a century. They've compared it to Linear A, the undeciphered Minoan script. They've looked at Hittite hieroglyphs. Some think it's a religious hymn, a prayer. Others say it's a calendar for agriculture or rituals. A few suggest it records a narrative, a journey or a battle. But without a bilingual text, a Rosetta Stone for this script, every translation is a guess. Pattern recognition without an answer. The disc resists. It speaks in a language that died with its makers. Its method is as interesting as its message. The stamped seals imply a system. Someone made a set of 45 reusable dies, arranged them, pressed them into clay, fired it. That's a form of printing, a revolutionary idea for its time, but we've found no other objects like it. No scrolls, no tablets, no other discs. Why was it a prototype? A special commission that never caught on. Did the knowledge die with the artisan, or was the technology unnecessary for a culture writing on perishable materials? Its isolation is profound, a flash of innovation that never sparked a wider revolution. Think of the Rosetta Stone. Its power was presenting the same message in 3 scripts, one known. The Phaistos Disc offers no such gift. It's a monologue in a forgotten tongue that forces a confrontation with the limits of understanding. We can excavate palaces, restore frescoes, map Minoan trade routes. But a core piece of their intellectual world, the content of this printed document, is silent, a humbling reminder. So much of history isn't just buried but truly lost. The knowledge evaporated, leaving the shell. What does an isolated artifact say about knowledge in the ancient world? Could advanced ideas appear in one place, a single spark, snuffed out by disaster or change? The disc's mystery pulls curiosity outward. If a culture on Crete could develop such a sophisticated, isolated method, what about connections between far-flung cultures? Could ideas or people have traveled across oceans earlier than our maps suggest? That leads to an artifact, one that seems to place a very specific piece of the old world, unmistakably, in the heart of the new. A missionary in New Zealand back in the 1830s was given this object by a Maori community. It was a brass bell about the size of a fist, and it was cracked. But it had an inscription. The characters weren't Maori. They weren't from the Pacific at all. They were Tamil from South India, thousands of miles away. This Tamil bell, the inscription has been translated. It says partly, it's the ship's bell of Mohiddin Baksh, or maybe the bell from his mosque. The script style is from the 15th or 16th century. So Mohiddin Baksh was probably a captain or a merchant, and his bell ended up in New Zealand. It's in the Te Papa Museum now, so how did it get there? In that period, the Indian Ocean was all trade networks. Tamil sailors were navigators. Their ships could reach Southeast Asia, and from there, you connect to Austronesian networks that go across the Pacific. So it's plausible a Tamil ship caught in a storm driven east, wrecking on the coast. Survivors might have integrated or not, leaving just the bell. The Maori would have seen it as a taonga, a treasure, kept it, passed it down until it was given to that missionary. There's another possibility, though. A less romantic one. The bell could have come later, on a European whaling ship in the early 1800s. A sailor's curio, traded or lost, that would explain it without a medieval voyage. But the Maori oral history doesn't suggest that. They said it was old, found in the roots of a tree that had grown around it, so it had been there a long time. This bell is between possibility and proof. We know contact happened over huge distances. The sweet potato got across the Pacific, so why not a bell? It means our maps of ancient movement are incomplete. Ghost routes, traveled once, never recorded. What other objects are out there? A bead, a tool, sitting in a drawer. Clues to forgotten meetings. These aren't monuments, they're lost property. Accidental time capsules from journeys that fell out of history. And that idea of an object depicting another time pulls our focus now to a different kind of depiction, not a lost bell, a carved wall where the images seem to show technology, not from the ancient world but from our own. The ceiling panel at Abydos in the Temple of Seti I. There's a shape in the stone. It looks exactly like a helicopter. Right next to it, something that could be a submarine. And maybe a futuristic aircraft. The shapes are so clear to us now, after a century of seeing these machines. That's the Abydos Helicopter. It feels like a snapshot from another time. But the explanation is really about how history gets written and then rewritten, and sometimes how we misread it. Egyptologists say this isn't prophecy. It's a palimpsest. A palimpsest is when old writing is scraped off a manuscript so new writing can go on top, but traces of the old words remain. In stone, that happens through recarving. King Seti I built this temple. His royal titles and epithets were carved in raised relief. Then years later, his son, Ramesses II, he modified some of the inscriptions. Workers plastered over certain cartouches and recarved them, changing the dedication. Over thousands of years, the plaster fell away. What was left was two sets of hieroglyphs, one carved right over the other. Erosion smoothed the edges, blending them into single, composite shapes. So the helicopter isn't one symbol, it's several. If you look, you can pick it apart. The rotor blades come from a glyph that means to be powerful. The cockpit and tail are from another sign, meaning to protect. These were part of Seti's titulary. When Ramesses' workers recarved over them, they created this accidental hybrid. The submarine shape is a similar overlap, a serpent glyph and a staff. It's two messages from the past being read as one image from the future. This has a name, pareidolia. It's our brain's tendency to find familiar patterns in random data. We see faces in clouds, animals in rock formations, and hear modern machines in ancient script. The internet took this image and shared it everywhere, but without the context of the temple wall. Separated from its story, it became proof for some people, proof of lost knowledge or visitors from far away. That leads to another question. Why are we so drawn to these ideas? Maybe because they make the ancient world feel closer, more like us. Or maybe they offer a more exciting story than the slow, meticulous work of archaeology. In looking for helicopters, we can miss the actual marvel right in front of us. The real wonder of Abydos isn't a mistaken glyph. It's the staggering artistry of the original carvings. The profound theological complexity of the temple's layout. The historical record of a father and a son, both seeking immortality in stone. The real mystery is how they achieved such perfection with copper tools and human skill. That tension between the sensational mystery and the profound, documented achievement, it points us toward a scale of construction that defies simple explanation. Not a misinterpreted symbol, but an undeniable mountainous reality. A place where the stones themselves are the message. Their arrangement speaks of a knowledge that still whispers from the desert. There's a place in the mountains of southern Siberia, Gornaya Shoria. The landscape is shattered granite, enormous blocks. Some are larger than houses. They are scattered across the slopes. The scale is hard to take in. The largest ones are estimated to weigh over 3,000 tons. That's heavier than the biggest stones at Baalbek. And they aren't just boulders. Many have sharp 90-degree angles, flat surfaces that meet with what looks like precision. To an observer, it looks like the ruins of a wall. Or a platform built by giants. The site feels engineered, arranged. It challenges what we assume about ancient peoples in this part of the world. The question is origin. Is this the handiwork of a lost civilization, with technology we can't imagine? Or is it a spectacular geological performance? Geologists have an explanation. The rock is granite. Granite, under pressure and temperature changes, can fracture along natural planes, a process called exfoliation. It causes sheets of rock to peel away, often creating flat surfaces. Frost wedging happens too. Water seeps into cracks, it freezes, it expands, it splits stone along straight lines. Over millennia, tectonic forces can tilt these blocks, shift them, stack them in ways that appear arranged. The remote, harsh environment of Gornaya Shoria is a perfect laboratory for these forces, and there's the complete absence of cultural evidence. No pottery shards, no tool marks, no signs of settlement, just the stones in a wild, mountainous terrain. Yet, for those who see a constructed site, the arrangement feels too deliberate. The blocks aren't randomly scattered. They are often in lines, stacked in tiers. The angles are too clean, the surfaces too extensive to be coincidence. They argue natural processes might create one or two such blocks, but not an entire mountainside filled with them, fitting together like an unfinished puzzle. The logistical challenge is staggering. Moving a 3,000-ton block of granite, even today, requires specialized machinery. The idea of a prehistoric culture doing this in the Siberian wilderness seems, to mainstream archaeology, an impossibility. There's no known culture in the region's history with the social organization or the technical means. This site invites comparison to other mysteries. The trilithon at Baalbek, the polygonal walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, Gornaya Shoria feels like part of a whispered pattern, a recurring theme of massive stonework. On different continents, separated by oceans and time, are we looking at proofs of a lost global knowledge, or are we just witnessing the repetitive artistry of geology, which can create similar forms across the planet? The debate forces us to examine our own perception. Do we see design because we are a species that builds, and we project our methods onto the natural world? Or is our understanding of the past missing critical chapters written in 3,000-ton stones? Whether a natural wonder or a human one, Gornaya Shoria humbles us. It presents a scale that defies easy explanation. It stands as a monument, either to the planet's unimaginable creative power, or to a human ambition so vast its memory has vanished. This contemplation of immense, silent forms leads to an artifact of the opposite kind, not a mountain of stone, but a palm-sized bundle of metal. Its mystery lies not in its weight, but in its intricate, impossible craftsmanship. The Voynich Manuscript is in a library vault. It's a book that can't be read, 240 pages, 15th century vellum, a soft, worn cover. Inside, every page is covered in this graceful, looping script, an alphabet of characters no one understands, and next to the text, illustrations, a world that's almost familiar but alien, plants with bulbous roots, twisting leaves, they don't match any known botany. Circular diagrams of constellations that don't align with our sky, and then, maybe the strangest part, pages showing nude women, bathing in these interconnected, vibrant green pools. Like part of some elaborate biological system or balneological system, it was discovered in 1912 by a Polish book dealer, Wilfrid Voynich. He found it in a chest at a Jesuit college in Italy. And since that moment, it's become the holy grail for cryptographers. The best minds have tried to crack it. World War II codebreakers, the same people who broke the Enigma cipher, they turned their skills to the Voynich. They found nothing. Modern supercomputers running linguistic pattern analysis have also failed. The text has structure, though. It follows statistical rules of a real language. Words have a predictable length. Characters follow certain patterns. It's not random gibberish, but it doesn't correspond to any known tongue, living or dead. Theories are everywhere. Some say it's an elaborate medieval hoax created to defraud a wealthy patron with a fake book of secrets. But the complexity, the consistency, it argues against a simple forgery. The cost in time and materials for a meaningless prank would have been enormous. Others think it's written in a constructed language or a known language, but with an incredibly sophisticated cipher, where each character stands for a syllable or a concept. The most tantalizing idea is that it records genuine but lost knowledge. Maybe it's an herbal manual for plants from a different continent, or a treatise on alchemy and medicine, using coded language to protect powerful secrets from the uninitiated. The manuscript itself is divided into sections based on the art: herbal, astronomical, biological, cosmological, pharmaceutical. The herbal section is the largest, detailed paintings of fantastical flora. The astronomical section has these fold-out pages, medallions with stars and zodiac symbols arranged in ways that suggest a unique cosmology. The biological section, with the bathing figures and strange tubing, it's been interpreted as everything. A guide to human reproduction, a metaphorical map of spiritual energies. Each section deepens the mystery, offering a visual key that itself can't be decoded. What drives this century-long obsession? It speaks to a basic human need: to understand, to solve, to know. the Voynich Manuscript is the ultimate locked door. It promises answers about nature, about the past, about alternative ways of seeing the world, but it grants none. It's a monument to the possibility that some knowledge can become so specialized, so guarded, or so alien that it gets permanently separated from its meaning. The book is a vessel, but the contents have evaporated, leaving only this beautiful, impenetrable shell. This confrontation with the truly indecipherable, it prepares us for an artifact of a different kind. One whose meaning isn't lost in code, but etched plainly in crystal. A relic that seems to bridge our world with one of impossible, miniature artistry. Workers were digging a trench along the Mureș River in Aiud, Romania. This was in 1974. About 10 meters down, their shovels hit something hard. They uncovered a wedge-shaped metal object, and right beside it, the massive bones of a mastodon, a creature from the last ice age. The object was sent to a museum. It sat there for years, then someone finally analyzed it. The results didn't make sense. It was made of aluminum, an aluminum alloy with a thick, natural oxide coating. That coating suggested it was very old. The layer of earth where it was found was dated to around 11,000 years ago, a time when humans used stone and bone. Aluminum is everywhere in the Earth's crust, but to get it pure, to make it usable, that's difficult. It requires electrolysis. That process wasn't invented until the 1800s. So you have this wedge, a piece of advanced metallurgy, found next to the bones of an extinct animal. The object itself isn't much to look at, about 20 centimeters long. 12 wide, 7 thick, it weighs over 2 kilograms. One end is rounded, the other end looks like it was struck, hit repeatedly. There are 2 perfectly round holes bored into it. To us, it could be a part from a machine, maybe a digging tool, but its composition is the problem. The analysis said 89% aluminum, with traces of copper, zinc, lead. That specific alloy isn't natural, it's manufactured. Mainstream archaeology has an explanation: contamination. They say it's a piece of 20th century equipment. From a dredger or a bulldozer, it fell into the pit during some earlier, unrecorded work, got buried, was later mistaken for something ancient. That thick oxide layer could form in just decades in the right soil. And the mastodon bones, they're old, but they could have been moved by the river. So the layer wasn't a sealed, pristine context. The dating is unreliable because the stratigraphy was mixed. But the people who found it, they counter that. The original workers said the object was encased in a hardened layer of sand and gravel. It seemed undisturbed. They say the oxide layer is too thick to form quickly, and they ask a simple question. If it's modern junk, why was it so deep and right there with ancient remains? The debate always comes back to provenance. How do you verify the exact circumstances of a find after the fact? Without photographs of the object in the ground, taken right then, you're left with memory. With notes which can be wrong. The Aiud wedge is in the History Museum of Transylvania now, in Cluj-Napoca. Its label is cautious. It doesn't call it an ancient artifact. But it doesn't dismiss it either. It's in a state of limbo, a physical question mark. It's like other objects, the Kingoodie Hammer, the Coso Artifact. Each one tests our methods, our assumptions. How do you separate the truly anomalous from the misidentified, from the contaminated? What protocols guard against that? Meticulous layer-by-layer excavation, immediate documentation. This artifact forces a confrontation, not just with time but with process. It asks us to consider the chain of custody. For every object that challenges history, a single break in that chain can turn an extraordinary find into a permanent mystery. If you accept the wedge as ancient, it means something. A forgotten episode of high-temperature industry, a culture smelting aluminum 11,000 years ago. That idea is so disruptive it seems to demand impossible proof. Yet the object is just there. Its silent, metallic presence refuses to be easily explained. It embodies a tension, the thrilling possibility of rewriting history. Weighed against the rigorous, often unglamorous standards of proof, that tension pulls our focus now from a single metal wedge to an entire enigmatic landscape. One that seems scarred by forces that defy any conventional explanation. The Scottish Highlands have these ruins. They look burned, like an old fire got to them, but it's more than that. They're Iron Age hill forts, places like Tap O' Noth, Dunadir. Their walls aren't just fallen stone. The ramparts are fused. The granite and basalt stones are melted together into a solid, glassy mass. That's vitrification. It turns stone into something like crude ceramic or obsidian, and it needs a sustained heat, over 1,100 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than a normal wood fire, hot enough to melt copper. So the question is how and why? Why would people 2,000 years ago deliberately set their own defensive walls on fire like that? There are over 60 of these forts, built in the first millennium BC. They use the dry stone method, just stacking rocks, no mortar. The type of rock mattered. Granite with a lot of quartz vitrifies more easily. The process is chemical. At that extreme temperature, the minerals inside the rock melt, they flow. Then they cool, they solidify into a hard, continuous mass that binds everything together. It's like the wall was glazed, a primitive, incredibly durable glass. But generating that heat on the scale of a massive rampart, that's the puzzle. Theories have been around for centuries. One old idea was an enemy attack. That invaders besieged the fort, piled fuel against the wooden-laced walls, and set a fire so intense it accidentally fused the stone. But that seems counterintuitive. An attacking force would want to break the wall, not strengthen it by turning it to solid glass, and many vitrified sections are found at the wall's core. Not just the outer face. That suggests a more controlled fire, maybe an internal one, which leads to the possibility it was intentional, a deliberate construction technique. The Iron Age builders might have stacked wood and other combustibles inside the hollow wall as they built it. Then, in a carefully managed ceremony or an engineering feat, they set it alight. A slow burn, possibly fed for days, it would have baked and fused the stones, creating a monolithic barrier, siege-resistant, far stronger than loose rock. The effort would have been immense, gathering enough fuel, timber, peat, brush to maintain that heat across a long wall required planning, communal labor. It speaks of a society with sophisticated pyrotechnical knowledge, the ability to execute a dangerous, large-scale project. Modern experiments have tried to replicate it. Researchers build small, replica dry stone walls with internal fuel chambers and set them ablaze. The results are instructive but incomplete. Often, only the stones right around the fuel pockets vitrify. Achieving uniform fusion throughout a thick wall, like in the ancient forts, has proven elusive. That gap between experiment and artifact hints that the ancient builders may have used a lost technique. Maybe they selected specific rocks that acted as flux, lowering the melting point, or a different, more efficient fuel source, something that burned cleaner and hotter. The purpose is still debated. Was it purely practical, creating an impenetrable fortress, or was there a ritual dimension? The act of transformation by fire is powerful symbolism. Turning earth into a new, permanent substance could have been seen as consecrating the site, merging the community's spirit with the very stone that protected them. These vitrified forts are monuments to a forgotten skill. A peak of practical knowledge that appears, was used across a wide region, and then vanishes. Did the secret die with a generation of masters, or did changing warfare or social structures make the colossal effort no longer worthwhile? These silent, glass-strewn ramparts ask us to look beyond simple categories. Defense or ritual, They suggest a culture that viewed fire not just as a tool for warmth or cooking, but as a fundamental force for transformation, a means to alter the landscape itself. To make stone obey human will, that mastery over elemental power directed at stone on a grand scale, it makes a striking contrast. The Lady of Elche has this very serene face. It was found in 1897 near the town of Elche in Spain. A limestone bust, her expression is calm, almost detached, but then you have this headdress, these two huge wheel-like coils on either side of her face. They're called rhodetes. They frame her with this geometric precision. There's intricate jewelry too on her neck and ears. The craftsmanship is exquisite. It dates to the 4th century BC. From the start, it caused debate. The style didn't fit any known category. Some saw its refined symmetry as evidence of a lost, advanced culture. More speculative ideas came up, a priestess from Atlantis, a survivor of a sunken world. The truth from art historians is more grounded. The lady is accepted as a product of the Iberian civilization from eastern Spain. It's a funerary urn lid. The back is hollow, meant to cover a receptacle for cremated remains. Traces of paint suggest it was once vividly colored. Those great wheels are likely an elaborate hairstyle or ceremonial headdress, denoting high status or divinity. She could be a goddess or a deified noblewoman. The style is a fusion. You can see Greek influence in the serene, idealized features, possible Phoenician touches in the jewelry. But the overall effect is distinctly Iberian. It's a local interpretation. The bust is about 56 centimeters tall, carved from local limestone. It's in the National Archaeological Museum of Spain now. You can compare her to a classical Greek bust. The Greek work seeks idealized human beauty, a celebration of the physical form. The Lady of Elche is more stylized, more symbolic. Her beauty is in her solemnity, in the complex code of her adornment. She's less a portrait of a person than a vessel for an idea status, the sacred remembrance. This artifact shows how a single object becomes a powerful symbol. For Spain, she's an icon of national heritage, a link to a deep pre-Roman past. But that symbolic weight can pull the object away from its archaeological reality. The romantic interpretation, a lost civilization, a mysterious priestess often speaks louder than the scholarly consensus of a funerary urn lid. That tension is a recurring theme. Where does legitimate mystery end and national myth-making begin? How do you honor an artifact's power to inspire while staying faithful to the quieter, often more profound story it actually tells? The lady doesn't provide easy answers. She endures, her stone eyes holding a secret that's both artistic and spiritual. She reminds us the past speaks in many languages, the language of fact and the language of symbol. And sometimes the most enduring artifacts are those that masterfully speak both. So that's a face mapping cultural identity, and that leads to an artifact that maps something far vaster. Not a human visage, but the cosmos itself, captured in a way that feels eerily complete. Marble can hold the weight of the heavens. In the 2nd century, a Roman sculptor carved the Titan Atlas. Muscles straining, holding a celestial globe on his shoulders. That's the Farnese Atlas, a statue but also a star map. The globe itself is a detailed sculpture of the night sky. The night sky, as the ancient Greeks knew it, 41 constellations are etched across the surface. You can see Hercules, his club raised, the winding shape of Draco the dragon. The bear we call Ursa Major. This isn't random decoration. It's a precise snapshot, a snapshot of Hellenistic astronomy frozen in stone. The statue was rediscovered in the 16th century. Found among the ruins of the Farnese family's properties in Rome, it was damaged, missing pieces, but the globe was largely intact. Restoration work brought the figure back. But the real treasure was the sphere he carried. Scholars realized the constellations weren't just symbolic. Their positions were specific. By measuring the arrangement of the carved stars, astronomers could work backwards. They could account for the precession of the equinoxes, that slow, gradual wobble of Earth's axis. It makes the positions of the stars shift over centuries. And when they calculated where these carved stars would have been in the sky, the data pointed to a source time, around 125 years before the Common Era. Which suggests the sculptor wasn't inventing, he was copying from a far older source, likely a star catalogue compiled by the astronomer Hipparchus. Hipparchus's original writings are lost. We only know his work through references by later scholars, so this globe might be our most direct physical link to his observations. It's a translation of mathematical data into a permanent, three-dimensional form, a library of the sky carved in marble, and if you look closely, the choices are revealing. The globe shows only constellations, no planets are marked, which makes sense. Planets wander. Their positions aren't fixed. The selection of 41 figures represents the classical Greek understanding. The understanding of the celestial sphere, it's a complete system, a way of ordering the chaos of the night into a recognizable mythology. Each cluster of stars tells a story. The hero, the beast, the hunter, this fusion of science and myth was how knowledge was encoded, how it was remembered, how was such precision achieved. Without telescopes or modern tools, it speaks to a tradition of meticulous, naked-eye observation, generations of watchers noting the slow dance of the heavens. The knowledge was maintained through painstaking records, through instruments like the armillary sphere, and through artworks like this one. It was a collaborative project across time. A Greek astronomer makes his calculations. Centuries later, a Roman artist immortalizes them in sculpture. And centuries after that, we decipher it, and that raises a question. A profound question. What other ancient art holds encoded data waiting to be read? Could a temple frieze contain climate records? Could the patterns on a vase reflect forgotten mathematical principles? The Farnese Atlas stands as proof that our ancestors didn't just create beauty, they used art as a vessel for complex information. They built a bridge between the observable world and the eternal, using the tools they had, chisel, pigment, and an unwavering gaze upward. The globe on Atlas's shoulders is more than a burden. It's a gift, a transmission. It challenges the idea that ancient science was purely speculative. Here is evidence of measurement, of modeling, of a desire to capture cosmic truth in a tangible form. It turns mythology into a coordinate system, and as we contemplate this celestial map from the deep past, our journey brings us back to Earth, to a mystery not written in stars or stone, but in the soil and memory of a landscape. Waiting for its story to be told, the ocean floor has a city made of stone. Off Yonaguni in Japan, a diver back in 1986 discovered something that shouldn't be there. A huge terraced structure came out of the blue gloom. It had flat platforms, sharp edges, staircases climbing the sides. Pillars stood like silent guards. The whole site was a geometric dream sitting under the Pacific. It felt like a sunken temple, a plaza for giants lost when the world was younger. This is the Yonaguni Monument. And it raises one of the most profound questions. When does nature end and architecture start? The main structure is massive, about 150 meters long, 50 meters wide, 25 meters tall. Its most striking features are the clean right angles, the flat terraces that stack like a pyramid, the straight vertical walls dropping into sand. There's a formation some call the turtle, a low platform with a shape carved out like the reptile. Nearby, a narrow archway cuts through the rock, and a star-shaped platform sits at one end, its points radiating with this eerie symmetry. To the human eye, it screams design. It feels planned. Marine geologists tell a different story. The rock is sandstone from the Miocene epoch, millions of years old. In this region, tectonic forces are relentless. Earthquakes regularly fracture the bedrock along straight lines, creating natural planes of weakness. Then the ocean takes over. Powerful currents full of sand act like an abrasive tool. They scour the rock, undercutting softer layers, leaving harder shells behind. This process, marine erosion, can produce remarkably flat surfaces and sharp edges. The stair-like terraces could simply be where different sedimentary layers eroded at different rates. The pillars might be remnants left standing as the material around them washed away. Nature, given enough time and the right forces, is a master sculptor of geometry. Professor Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus, spent decades studying the site. He became its most vocal proponent for a human origin. He points to features he believes erosion alone can't explain: the twin monoliths that look like carved pillars, the narrow, perfectly straight channels resembling pathways, a series of round holes drilled into the rock, which he suggests could have held wooden posts. For Kimura, the accumulation of these right-angled, symmetrical forms is too great to be coincidence. He envisions a ceremonial complex, maybe for sun worship, constructed over 10,000 years ago. A time when sea levels were much lower, and this area was dry land, part of a lost continent some call Mu. Yet for all its visual drama, the site lacks the usual evidence archaeologists rely on. No one has found pottery shards, stone tools, hearths, or burial remains nearby. No carvings or inscriptions on the walls. It's a silent, empty stage. Compare it to a known submerged city like Dwarka off India. There, divers found anchors, pottery, structures that clearly align with historical descriptions. The cultural context is present. At Yonaguni, there is only the stone itself and our interpretation of its form. This places the monument in a unique category of mystery. It's not an object you can hold and test. It's a landscape, a question etched into the seabed. The debate forces us to examine our own perceptions. We are a species that builds. Our eyes are trained to see intention in straight lines and right angles. When we look at Yonaguni, we can't help but see something familiar, something built. But is that a truth or a projection? Think of a natural sandstone formation in a desert, like the flat-topped mesas of the American Southwest. They have sharp edges and layered terraces, created by wind and water over eons. We admire their beauty, but we don't call them ruins. We accept them as geology. Yonaguni is that same process happening underwater, in a rock type prone to fracturing in straight lines. The context, the deep, mysterious ocean, makes it feel more alien, more significant. So what would it mean if the proponents are right? If this is a structure from over 10,000 years ago, it would belong to a period just after the last ice age. A time of great climatic upheaval when melting glaciers raised sea levels and drowned coastlines worldwide. It would be a monument from a forgotten chapter of human endeavor. A society capable of large-scale stonework, living on a now submerged shelf of land. Its existence would suggest the map of early human civilization is missing entire continents, not just islands. This brings us back to the collective weight of all these artifacts, from a hammer in ancient stone to a battery in a clay jar, from a gear-driven computer to a submerged city. Each one, in its own way, challenges the smooth, linear narrative we've constructed. They are outliers, anomalies. Some may be misidentified, others may be hoaxes. But as a group, they represent a persistent, whispering doubt. They ask us to hold our knowledge lightly, to leave room for wonder, to acknowledge that history is not a closed book, but a story still being written, with pages missing that we are only just beginning to find. The past is deeper, stranger, and far more resilient than we imagined, and its greatest mysteries may still be waiting, silent, in the stone and the sea. 25 artifacts, each one a question. Together, they become a bigger question. They draw a picture of the past, but it's not a straight line. It's more like a scattered constellation. A tapestry woven with threads of advanced metalwork, star maps, engineering on a scale we still can't quite grasp. You see the same things over and over. Pure iron that doesn't rust, aluminum alloy from the Ice Age, granite spheres perfectly round, gears that predicted eclipses 1,000 years early. These aren't accidents, they're echoes of a capability, and together they challenge the simple story, the story of a steady climb from stone tools to computers. Instead, it suggests peaks and valleys, independent flowerings of technology, blooming in isolation, maybe shared along forgotten routes and then lost. Lost to time or conflict or disaster, the idea of a single lost civilization like Atlantis is too simple. The reality is subtler, more fascinating. Multiple societies across the globe reaching sophisticated heights in specific ways. Their knowledge later faded into myth or was buried. Historians of science tell us anomalies aren't nuisances. They're the engine. Thinker Thomas Kuhn saw it. Paradigms shift when enough contradictory evidence piles up. The old framework breaks. The Antikythera Mechanism was once just an oddity. Now it's a cornerstone of how we see Hellenistic science. The Viking settlement at Elands Ox Meadows moved from legend to fact because one well-documented site provided proof. Our timeline has changed before. It can change again, but this requires balance, a rigorous skepticism. For every iron pillar of Delhi, a real monument of ancient genius, there might be a Coso artifact. A modern spark plug encased in natural stone. The challenge is immense. Dating can be thrown off, contaminated soil, geological quirks, provenance relies on notes. A discoverer's notes which can be lost or imperfect. That's why you need everyone, the geologist analyzing stoneware, the metallurgist studying alloy, the astronomer calculating star positions. It all has to converge to authenticate a mystery. So where does that leave this collection? Some artifacts are unassailable. Pillars, the Antikythera Mechanism's gears are real. The iron pillar's corrosion resistance is measurable. The star positions on the Nebra Sky Disc are precise. These resist dismissal. They're not just strange objects, they're functional demonstrations of knowledge. Others live in a liminal space, the vitrified forts of Scotland. The massive blocks at Gornaya, Shoria. The line between human artistry and geological force is blurred, beautifully, frustratingly. These artifacts force a question about proof. How much evidence is enough to rewrite a chapter of the human story? Do we need a library, a city, an unbroken chain, or can we learn to listen to quieter testimony? A single, perfect sphere, a battery that still holds a charge. The quest isn't about proving ancient astronauts or sunken continents. It's about humility. Acknowledging the vast gaps in our record, the resilience of knowledge lost and then found. These objects are invitations to look deeper, to question assumptions, to wonder what other chapters are still waiting, silent to be read. The power of these 25 artifacts, it's not really about any one answer they give. It's the question they all ask together. They draw a picture of human history that's much richer, much more intricate, and not at all a straight line. Our story isn't a simple climb from primitive to advanced. It's this complex web of brilliant rises and catastrophic falls, knowledge gained with incredible ingenuity and then lost, just eroded away over centuries. These objects are the survivors of that. They're like echoes from chapters torn out of the book, and to study them, that isn't turning away from science. It's engaging with the heart of it, questioning the narratives, testing boundaries, confronting anomalies. That's how understanding grows. The Antikythera Mechanism was once called an impossible fantasy. Until technology let us see its truth. The Nebra Sky Disc went from a curious trinket to a window on prehistoric astronomy. Each one of these artifacts is a provocation, a challenge to look closer and to think deeper. They remind us the map of our past is still being drawn. Vast territories are still uncharted. At the core of every mystery is a testament to human ingenuity. The iron pillar defying corrosion, the precise spheres of Costa Rica, celestial calculations locked in marble, they speak to a universal drive to understand the world and to leave a mark on it. Our ancestors weren't just passive, they were observers, experimenters, engineers, and we're only starting to properly measure what they achieved. There's this tantalizing possibility that we've only seen the peaks of their capability. The full scope of what they did might still be buried, or submerged, or forgotten. Carl Sagan once said that somewhere, something incredible is waiting to be known. These 25 artifacts are proof of that. They aren't endpoints, they're starting points. Each one is an invitation to research, to debate, to wonder. We'd encourage you to delve deeper into the stories that captivated you. Read the conflicting theories, examine the evidence, reach your own conclusions. This journey through history's riddles is a collaborative one, and your curiosity is the most essential tool. If this voyage into the unexplained sparked that sense of wonder, consider joining us for more. Subscribe to keep exploring the boundaries of knowledge, where every discovery asks a new question, and we'd truly love to hear your voice in this. In the comments, tell us which of these impossible artifacts you find most convincing, or which mystery you think holds the key to rewriting a piece of our story. The past isn't silent. It whispers through stone, through metal, through star maps. Our task is just to learn how to listen.